I have looked at energy and the role of Cuba in the international system of the Caribbean. I begin by just looking at the context, then I'll give a brief profile of Jamaica's energy, followed by an important area which I believe is impacting the whole energy scenario with Cuba-Jamaica relations, and that's the Venezuelan Energy Cooperation Agreements. I'll then follow with renewable energy options, given the fact that we have very little choice in the Caribbean region. Although Cuba itself is now producing some oil and gas and has great potential in the future, we are also hopeful in Jamaica that in the future we'll be producing oil and gas or some other type of fossil fuel, but we are not there yet. So renewable energy options really provide us for the immediate solutions that we need to look at, especially in terms of the present energy market. I'll discuss briefly some energy efficiency and conservation options and look at the energy cooperation opportunities that we have with Cuba. Just as it affects Jamaica, it affects Cuba. Our energy-related threats are really from the fundamentals, which are not having adequate and secure supplies at affordable prices, oil price volatility, which we have seen do lots of hiccups and jumps and somersaults since January this year, demand and supply, refinery capacity issues, geopolitical issues, which we call non-fundamental issues, and economic growth or recession, as can be seen with the link with the weak US dollar, as well as growth in China and in India. We should be careful, nevertheless, to blame the growth of China and India on energy prices. Also, another threat is the environmental damage that is caused by the use of traditional fossil fuels and the whole issue of climate change. World oil consumption has continued to grow, even though over the last 7 years oil prices have been rising. Non-OPEC oil production has not shown any significant increase, and I show this graph because Cuba is a non-OPEC oil production center, although it's not shown here because it's so difficult for us to get the statistics from Cuba. We have seen a movement from between 2000 and 2008 of the average price of oil moving from $27 per barrel to over $100 per barrel. There are some key assumptions which we base our analysis of energy on, and these are that fossil fuel will remain dominant up to 2030, that non-oil producers as well as oil-producing countries will face increased vulnerabilities because of geopolitics and non-fundamental issues. Global warming will continue to be a major issue, especially if we do not curtail our use of fossil fuel and if we continue to use it in an inefficient manner. The use of biofuels will increase as technology advances. Although there will be accelerated growth in the use of alternative fuels, their share of world energy supply will remain relatively small. Nuclear power has renewed promise, but there are still some public concerns. And new policy measures, including global cooperation in technology transfer, will foster change in energy consumption patterns. If we look at Jamaica's energy mix, unfortunately, I cannot give you a similar graph for Cuba at this time. I will work on it, and if at some near future date we are able to share this information with you, but I'm going to try and get the information from the Cuban embassy. But we see Jamaica being so highly dependent on petroleum imports to meet its energy needs, in excess of 94%. The other small percentage is made from wind, hydropower, coal, charcoal, bagasse, and fuel wood. Our import bill last year was just over $2 billion, and we are looking at nearly $3 billion this year. This is really unsustainable because the total exports for Jamaica was below $2 billion in 2007. We have a high energy intensity index, and I know Zia can speak very well about that, and we have high income elasticity for energy demand. Although we are now seeing a leveling off of consumption in the transportation sector. We have low efficiencies and reliability in power generation, and we have a high generation capacity using diesel oil, which is very expensive. Our CO2 emission levels in Jamaica are relatively high at about 4 tons of CO2 per capita per annum. And demand for automotive fuels is growing at approximately 4% per annum, and we have to do something about our driving habits. Our import bill, just to give you a comparison, we moved in 2003 from $813 million to over $2 billion. I'll now talk about the Venezuelan corporation in terms of, well, let's look at oil. Venezuela ships approximately 92,000 barrels per day of oil per day, crude oil, to Cuba. And the payment is mainly by medical services and technical assistance. Jamaica has a bilateral agreement with Cuba, and we have a quota of 23,000 barrels per day that we refine at the Petrojam refinery. PDVSA has invested in the upgrade of oil refineries in both countries. They have, in December last year, they opened the Cienfuegos plant in refinery in Cuba, and basically this plant is now supplying all of Central America with their fuel, with their refined product needs. And also they have invested 49% in the Petrojam refinery, and this refinery will see an upgrade within the next 3.5 to 4 years, moving from a hydroskimming facility, which is a basic old technology, to a delayed coker facility, which will result in a 50,000 barrels per day facility, producing a lot more refined products. And this is important because currently more than half the output of the Petrojam refinery is heavy fuel oil, which is not a very expensive. In fact, heavy fuel oil is cheaper than a barrel of crude oil. We sell this heavy fuel oil to JPSCO, whose plants are basically run on heavy fuel oil.